the biggest betrayal to law enforcement and public safety that I have ever seen.
So we have a massive story coming out of Maryland where the Governor Wes Moore, signed a law banning local law enforcement from working with ICE. But in a turn of event, local law enforcement agencies throughout the entire state came out and torched the governor for this law that they argue will only make the state a lot less safer. Welcome to the Immigration Report. If you want daily immigration updates without bias, with evidence, please consider subscribing. Let us get into it, starting with this video explaining what this law does.
Maryland law enforcement agencies can no longer partner up with ICE. The ban on 287G agreements was signed into law this morning. Advocates say it makes communities safer. Meanwhile, the agencies who have these agreements in place say it will have the opposite effect.
After years of advocating, 3 signatures have made 287G agreements banned in Maryland. These partnerships facilitated ICE to grant local law enforcement agencies federal immigration enforcement powers.
We refuse to blur the lines between state and federal authority in ways that undermine the trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. And the best way to address crime is by making sure that the communities feel safe and want to be involved in the process to stop it in the first place.
There are 9 active 287G agreements in the state, and under the new law, will need to end by July. In Maryland, 287G opened the door for corrections officers at jails to flag non-citizens to ICE for arrest and to serve and execute warrants to those who are jailed.
So what this governor is aiming to do, Governor Wes Moore, he's aiming to fortify Maryland as a sanctuary state where illegal aliens can feel safe and protected. It doesn't matter what crimes they have committed. He wants them to feel safe in the state while telling law enforcement that you cannot work with ICE, that you cannot work with the federal government. And we have an article here that explains more about this law. And the article is titled, Maryland Governor Moore signs bills into law ending law enforcement partnerships with ICE. And the article explains, Maryland Governor Wes Moore signs 2 emergency bills into law on Tuesday. The article continues, the new law prevents state agencies and employees from entering 287G agreements and orders all existing agreements end by July 2026. It comes amid ongoing federal crackdown on immigration enforcement led by the Trump administration. And as soon as he signed this bill into law, law enforcement agencies all throughout the state came out to speak up against this law. Take a look.
A warning on Wednesday issued by sheriffs from the 9 Maryland counties forced to end active partnerships with ICE under a new state law.
It is the biggest betrayal to law enforcement and public safety that I have ever seen.
There will be people missed. And that is my concern. There'll be people missed and who will be re-released into our communities who pose a threat.
The legislation signed by the governor Tuesday abolishes 287G agreements with ICE.
Mark my word, you will see a dramatic increase in the presence of ICE in this state. The abolishment of the 287G program is not the abolishment of ICE. They're going nowhere. In fact, they're going to intensify their efforts. We warned them this was going to happen, and it's going to happen.
So if you don't know what the 287G program is basically the program that allows local law enforcement and ICE to partner together and work together. And what Governor Wes Moore is saying, you have to end those partnerships. So if local authorities picked up an illegal alien that committed a crime, then what the governor is saying, instead of handing that individual over to ICE, what you have to do is release that individual back into the community where they'll continue to serve as a public safety threat. Everyone is sounding the alarm over this law. Even previous governor came out and spoke up against this. Take a look.
Because right now they're not even sitting at the table, they're not talking, and that's not helpful at all. And the same with the local governments. I mean, yesterday in my state, they just passed a bill, Governor Moore signed the emergency bill to prohibit local law enforcement cooperating with ICE. And all the local law enforcement officers saying we're going to ignore that because we're required to work with them. So I get the whole overreach and overstep and doing the wrong things, but when they have violent criminals that they're holding in jail that ICE wants to be detained, they shouldn't be let back on the streets. So there's 2 sides to this argument.
So that is a common sense governor, former governor Larry Hogan, and he's a former governor of Maryland. And he understands the consequence this bill, the signing of this bill, will have on Maryland when it comes to the crime rate. He understands that local law enforcement must work with ICE if they're supposed to keep people safe throughout the state. And here's Governor Wes Moore. He was confronted about this bill, And he proceeded to lie about the relationship between ICE and local law enforcement. Take a look.
We're not going to allow ICE to deputize our local law enforcement who are trained and who are accountable. I have too much respect for local law enforcement to ask them to be deputized by an agency that is now putting people in our streets who are untrained, unqualified, and unaccountable.
So that is a straight up lie by the governor. ICE's authorities does not include deputizing local law enforcement. As I mentioned before, the relationship between local law enforcement and ICE is when local law enforcement, they pick up a bad guy, an illegal alien. When it's time to release that individual, they reach out to ICE, they have ICE to come pick up that individual and get that individual deported back to their home country. Now, Governor Wes Moore, he's sitting there and he's lying to the American people, which is to tell you that he doesn't care about crime. He doesn't care about his constituents. What he cares about the politics of this and pushing a woke agenda to defund the police, to defund ICE, to not work with ICE. And who's going to suffer as a consequence of this? The people of Maryland, his citizens. Those are the people who's going to suffer, the people that voted for him. And he signed this bill into law knowing that Maryland has one of the most dangerous cities in the United States, Baltimore. Take a look at this reporting.
You know, we've been breaking down the crime numbers over the past 2.5 weeks, and they all seem to be pointing to one glaring question. Is this city really under control, or is it simply under attack?
So to put in sum, y'all, it's Baltimore's time.
On the same day he rejected help from the National Guard, Governor Wes Moore suggested crime is under control. But in the 17 days since the Guard has been on the ground in Washington, killers, attackers, and burglars have been on the ground in Baltimore. From an afternoon attack near Patterson Park to overnight break-ins at Old Goucher businesses, victims have been pleading for help.
Just brutally attacking somebody's off the case crazy.
Oh, look at this. In fact, in the 17 days since the National Guard has been on the ground in Washington, Baltimore has seen more than 2,500 crimes, twice as many as D.C. There have been 6 homicides, 9 rapes, 426 assaults, 271 aggravated assaults, 252 auto thefts, 155 burglaries, and 439 acts of vandalism, all of it in the past 17 days. In fact, Baltimore's 790 acts of violent crime in that period is 9 times greater than the violent crime committed in Washington.
We need to stop acting tough, and we need to start getting tough in Baltimore City.
So as you can see, this guy, Governor Wes Moore, he doesn't care about any of the people that he's supposed to be serving. Because if he did, he wouldn't have terminated these agreements that allowed local law enforcement to work with ICE. Because as noted, Baltimore is one of the most dangerous cities throughout the United States. And if you cared about those residents, you'd keep everything in place that would help with the reduction of crime. But he doesn't care. His motives are, basically, he wants to become president one day, which is why you see him making these moves. It's not for the people of Maryland. It's to feed into the Democrat woke ideology, the things that he thinks will get him that nomination to become president, to become the Democratic nominee. My recommendation is for the governor to start focusing on his people, the people that voted for him, the American citizens, the citizens of Maryland that wants to feel safe in their homes, in their communities. And here he was confronted about the crime rate of Baltimore. Take a look at his response.
Governor, I appreciate the investment, but it would just seem to me if despite that investment, Baltimore still ranks 3rd in the nation in violent crime rate per capita in the nation, that you would welcome in the President of the United States help if crime in Maryland. And as to the point of partisan politics, it's simply the truth. The truth isn't partisan. And the truth is most of the major cities in the United States are run by Democrat governors, and they're also the highest rate crime cities in the country. I'm on limited time, and I want to give you a chance to address something,
I would
though, Governor,
absolutely welcome federal support.
Apparently, there we go. You would welcome federal support. That's wonderful to hear.
I would absolutely welcome federal support.
Happy to hear that.
But I also know what federal support is going to be necessary and required. It's the reason that I've said we would love to have additional support for license plate readers, things that we know can actually stop crimes as they are happening and making sure that people are brought to justice, and not having $30 million cut from public safety budgeting that is coming from the federal government, that I would love to be able to make sure that the federal government...
The governor said he'd welcome federal support, but he wouldn't, because if he would, then he would allow ICE to partner with local law enforcement. Let me know in the comments below, do you support these local law enforcement agencies who's standing against this law signed by the governor? Also, that brings us to the end of today's Immigration Report. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you.